Hey guys, Grandmaster Dejan Bojkov here with yet another video on the Zugzwang. This time we are going to have a look at a very special, very famous game, a complete game in which the Zugzwang happened in a very early stage of it. I'm pretty sure that most of you know it. This is the so-called evergreen Zugzwang game, and it was played by Aron Nimzowitsch. His opponent was quite a strong Grandmaster himself, Friedrich Zemisch. In fact, you have definitely seen the Zemisch lines in the King's Indian defense and in the Nimzo Indian defense. He liked usually to put the pawn on f3, so in this game he didn't put the pawn on f3 for some reason, and we will see what happens from that. Nimzowitsch, on the other hand, is playing the Nimzo. He is trying to play the Nimzo Indian defense, but eventually he ended up in the Queen's Indian defense. Maybe this was the reason why Zemisch didn't want to enter Nimzovich's favorite opening. In any case, after d5, we're getting a position that can be seen in many modern tournaments as well. And here, the theory believes that the move e4 is going to promise white the advantage. But Zemisch decided to play a little bit safer. He took on d5, and after bishop f4, this was the first moment in which Nimzowitsch enjoyed the way that he has played the game, and he pushed the pawn to a6. So he is trying to fix a good square for his pieces. That's the c4 square. His plan is to continue after that with the move b5, and then depending on the circumstances, this knight can jump on d7, then on b6, then on c4, or it may choose the other route from c6 and then to a5 and to c4. Nevertheless, this is just a very nice square for the knight and for the rook as well. White is playing somewhat artificially, or I would say too straightforward, but without any clear plan. And on b5 he goes for queen b3, so this is allowing the move knight to c6. Another move that Nimzowitsch liked quite a lot. The knight is threatening to capture the pawn, and because of that threat, and because of the other threat that we already know, knight a5 and knight to c4, white has nothing else but to capture on c6, and black is also gaining something out of this trade, because he is at least trading his knight that made only one move for the knight that is making three moves. And nevertheless, even in this situation, white's position wasn't that bad. In fact, he had this little shot, fighting for the alternative square on c5, fighting for the alternative outpost on c5. And after d4, rook c6 and queen d4, even though he's sacrificing the pawn, he's going to get a couple of files for his rooks, plus he has two beautiful bishops, so he shouldn't be experiencing any problems. Zemisch, however, missed this opportunity and he played the move h3. Very careful, prophylactical move. Maybe sometime in the future he can enjoy this heir for the king. Maybe he's stopping the move g4, but honestly I don't really think that he is threatening anything. Neither did Nimzowitsch believe that he was threatening anything, and therefore he is overprotecting his bishop and he is connecting his rooks. Next move, after king h2, is the move that grabs even more center for the second player. He had the idea of going with the queen on b7 and eventually playing again on the queen side by pushing the pawns there. It made a lot of sense. This would have opened the diagonal for the bishop, so definitely this would have been a very nice way of playing it. Maybe b4 directly also makes a lot of sense. But rather than that, he decided to go for the move knight h5 and to grab more space on the other side with the move f5. He is playing for both sides of the game. King side, queen side, he is better everywhere. If now the knight steps back, he was planning to push the pawn further on a5. And nevertheless, knight to d1 was the less evil for the first player. Zemisch keeps on playing in the most passive way with the move queen to d1. In fact, he was probably thinking that he is playing in an active way, as he is creating the threat of e4. That threat can be easily stopped by the simple knight f6 move. But Nimzowitsch doesn't want to retreat. He pushes the pawn up to b4, and after knight b1 he goes with the bishop on b5. So he is saying, if you push the pawn, I'm going to take your rook. You cannot do it yet, so rook g1 is therefore played by the first player. It's pretty sad to see almost all the white pieces already on the first rank, as some of the players of the older generation were saying, are we setting up the pieces for the new game? This is what white is experiencing right now. And on the top of that, Nimzowitsch keeps on playing as energetically as he can, by bringing that bishop out as well. No retreat, no knight f6, no even a5 reinforcement on the queen side. He's offering the opponent a chance to finally make an active move, the move e4. Probably Zugzwang should have done this on the very first move, not on move number 20. Even though this is the only way to try and to free himself, as Nimzowitsch says, that's actually quite a serious mistake. Maybe he should have kept on playing passively with f4 and after knight f6. Black is better, no question about that. He's better on both the sides of the board and the center. But after e4, as we will see, it will get even worse for the first player. f4 played, queen h5, and rook takes f2. Pin is one of the ways to dominate the opponent's pieces. That's very clear in that case too. The bishop is not going anywhere, and on the top of that, white will have to try to keep all his weaknesses with what he's left with. But he has problems on the other side as well. This bishop, for instance, doesn't want to move under the threat of losing the pawns. But if the bishop doesn't move, how is this knight going to move? So we can already see that white is experiencing difficulties to develop his pieces. He's trying queen g5. This is his try. Defending the bishop. Maybe intending to kick away that rook. Maybe just defending the pawn on g3 as well, so that he can move the king out of the pin. He did move the king out of the pin. So what? After rook f5, where are you going with the queen? Only available square is this one. Otherwise the queen can get easily trapped. And now, if he wanted to take the queen, Nimzowitsch could have done this. He could have gone for rook e2, followed by bishop a4. The queen has nowhere to go. This is the result of the domination. That's a very typical byproduct of the domination. But knowing that the domination may lead to Zugzwang, Nimzowitsch is doing something else. He is further strengthening the position with the move bishop d3, asking the opponent basically, what is your next move? If he wants, he can still trap the queen. He is threatening to trap it, but this time only for a rook, while he has no other choice but to defend that square. And now comes the move which simply underlines the fact that the opponent doesn't have a move. The move h6, doing nothing. Your turn, your move. Where are you going? What are you moving? It's middle game, yes, but all the pieces are stalling. None of them is moving. This one cannot, either because of rook e2 or because it would be captured. This one literally doesn't have a square. This one, well, it can step back on the c1 square, but at the price of the knight. And king to h2 is also not a move because of the move rook f3, and the pin will be once again working. And you can notice that in this final line, the importance of the move h6. There is no even a move like queen g5. So nobody is moving. If none of the pieces is moving, that means that we are in the middle of a Zugzwang. Yes, he has pawn moves, he can push a3, but then we can push b3 in return, or we can push a5. His moves will be over one way or another. The pawn moves are easily taken away. And once the pawn moves are gone, he will have to move something. And that's a moment which Zugzwang probably didn't want to remember ever. That's the moment in which he realized how bad his position is, and he resigned. And if you think that the player who has created this masterpiece was not suffering from similar situations, then you're wrong. Now you're seeing a game that was played 7 years after the one that I have just showed you. Another game of Aron Nimzowitsch, but this time he has the black pieces and he's on the receiving end against the reigning world champion Alexander Alekhine. Alekhine forced the opponent first and foremost into passive defense and forced him under a pin, just like Nimzowitsch did in the previous game. After rook to c2, black has a choice. He had a choice, give the open file like this, but after rook c1, defend really passive position like that with queen f8. Most likely he would not have survived this after rook c7, and or try to defend passively with the move queen to e8. But we have seen from the previous game that the pins are as a rule going to lead to situations in which all the opponent's pieces, which are so badly pinned, are very vulnerable and prone to Zugzwang. And that's what we are seeing here as well. All that white does is he is improving his pieces. He could have started with the move rook a3, but he started with this one. He knows that the opponent has nowhere to go. Next, he is carefully tripling his pieces in a way that Alekhine loved to do, the so-called Alekhine gun. the queen is coming from behind, and this is the most dangerous way of tripling the pieces. Now white has 4 hits against the knight on c6. The knight is defended 4 times by his own pieces. Actually 1, 2, 3 times, yet not 4 even. But he can defend it for the 4th time with the move rook bc8. But the problem is that after this he doesn't even have a move. Nobody is moving under the threat of losing the key knight on c6. And plus, white can step back and attack the vulnerable rook, which is standing on the pin. b5 is a threat. Black has nothing else but to push the pawn up to b5. And there comes bishop takes b5. So he not only won a pawn, but if he wants, he can repeat the same thing. He does repeat the same thing. Luckily for black, he is just in time to defend the rook. He lost the pawn in the process, this is true. But he at least defended the rook. Well, there is another problem. You know the problem, right? He doesn't have a move. And that's all that Alekhine is using. He's pushing the pawn up. And after queen e8, he intends to push the other one up anyway. So if the queen is not moving, and now if the knight moves, we see what happens. We are going to take this knight for free. And if needed also, this check would have taken the queen too. But in any case, black doesn't have a move. The king needs to defend the rook. The rooks, they need to defend the knight. This knight has to defend the knight. And if the queen is not moving, that means that he'll be quickly running out of pawn moves. Just like in the previous game, black has no moves in the middle of the game. Well, okay, this is not the evergreen Zugzwang game, but nevertheless, it's a fine effort by Mr. Alekhine. Thank you guys for watching this. See you in the next video with another fabulous game on the Zugzwang.